What is up, duelists, and welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh video. Today we are taking a closer look at Chaos Origins, the upcoming TCG core booster set that's coming out this week, and it's got some really good stuff in it. Now, we're not going to go over every single card in the set. I'm just going to go over some of the more powerful archetypes and individual cards that I expect to see some actual play in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! And give you guys my opinion on how good exactly these decks are, and also a little bit of insight on how these decks work, so you know what to expect once Chaos Origins rolls around. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you find it helpful. Let me know your thoughts on what kind of cards in this set you're looking forward to in the comments down below. Without further ado, let's get started. Now, Chaos Origins is in general a very strong set, so here are the things we're going to take a look at in today's video. We've got the new Ritual of Light and Darkness deck theme, or as I like to call it, Chaos Ritual, because I think that's much cooler than Ritual of Light and Darkness. We'll see what ends up being the term that the community accepts for this deck, the Ritual deck around the new Blackluster Soldier and Dark Magician of Chaos. Then we've got the new Angeliki deck, which is the new TCG exclusive archetype, and even though it's only gotten its first wave, it honestly packs a little bit more of a punch than I expected in the first place. So yep, we've got the new Invoked cards, which have some really powerful new tools. The new Blitzclick deck, which is a completely new theme that is looking very promising, and I think it's awesome. And then some other things like honorable mentions, basically the new Melfi's, the new Phantom Knights, and some Clown Crew support. There's obviously more in the set, but once again, I think if we cover every single thing in the set, then it's probably going to end up too long of a video. And then we've got some very, very good individual cards that are definitely going to have an impact on the format. So let's get started. One quick announcement before we start. This upcoming weekend, I'm going to be taking part in the first iteration of the TCG Grand Slam, which is an invitational style tournament where they invite the best players across different TCGs and have them all compete in one trading card game to find out who the best card game player is. And for the first iteration, they've chosen Riftbound, which I've been learning recently for it. I have a little trailer lined up for you, but before we even get to that, I just want to get it out there that there's multiple ways to watch that tournament, one of which is it also is going to be on my Twitch channel over on twitch.tv/Joshua Schmidt yugioh, where you can even attend the event in person for free. You do have to get a ticket for the Sunday, but it's happening in Hamburg, Germany. Link is going to be in the description down below. Hope you enjoyed this trailer, and you might recognize some of these players from other trading card games if you've ever played those. And then I'll either see you there, or I hope you have a fun time watching it from home.
Is your European international champion, the greatest player of the modern era.
Do it. Enrico Maria is just going to have an look right there with the celebration.
Arnett Hushinbet, winner of the all-time championship.
And that's it. Shakes the hand. That's it. GG. It's over. Joshua Schmidt takes down another one.
And there you have it. The fist bump has been extended. The eighth seed strikes again. Gregor Kowalski, his prayers have been answered.
Your galactic champion.
Alan ZQ, best of Kaiser previously, best of Ezreal here, and now the best of Bologna.
So first off, we've got the Ritual of Light and Darkness, or also the Chaos Ritual deck. And of course, the core part of the archetype is the Light and Darkness Ritual, which is what the deck is named after in the OCG. And this, I think, is a deck that is expected to be a top-tier meta threat, simply based on the fact that it was a top-tier meta threat, or still is in the OCG. This is probably, those are the best cards out of this set in terms of OCG metagame impact. And it is a ritual strategy that revolves around two ritual monsters. And those are the Magician of Dark Chaos, Black Chaos, and the Blackluster Soldier, Soldier of Light and Darkness. Now, both of these guys share one particular line of text that basically dictates how the deck plays, because both of these guys are unaffected by your opponent's activated effects unless they target them. So both of these guys are incredibly hard to remove unless you target them, because they're both decently big. The Blackluster Soldier can actually grow even bigger by its own effect. In theory, it's really easy to out these if you just target them with any targeted sort of form of removal. They can be outed, but they cannot get outed by anything non-targeting. And the reason why this is important is because the card that makes this whole deck tick is the Trap Mind Shuffle. It's a continuous trap card that you're going to try to establish as early as turn 1 or turn 0, because there are cards that let you set it from the deck, which we'll get to in a moment, and immediately activate it. It's a continuous trap card that has two effects. The first one is basically your engine, because once per turn during either player's turn, you can add a monster that mentions the Light and Darkness ritual from the deck to the hand and then discard a card. The deck also has cards that offset this discard cost, essentially making it free a lot of the times. But that's how you get your engine rolling. That's how you get all your cards in rotation, because you can once per turn search. But the even more interesting part about Mind Shuffle is that it says when your opponent activates a card or an effect, you can return a level 7 or higher monster you control to the hand and then special summon a monster that mentions Light and Darkness ritual from your hand with a different name than the returned monster, ignoring its summoning conditions. That's important because it lets you summon the ritual monsters from hand, even though it is not a proper ritual summon. Essentially, this effect is not once per turn, which means that you can keep bouncing these cards back and forth. So the core idea of the deck is essentially you want to get one of these onto the field, one of them into your hand, and then when your opponent starts trying to out these guys by targeting them somehow, because that's the only way you can out these, you literally just use the Mind Shuffle, return this one to the hand, summon out the other one, and this is not limited to once per turn. So whenever they try to target one of these and try to out it, you just do the little thing, and they both do something on summon, which is really neat. So Magician of Dark Chaos, Black Chaos is the one you typically want to summon on your first turn, because upon summon, it lets you add a spell from your grave to your hand, and that's any spell. So when you're going first, you use any powerful spells, you can add them back to your hand with Magician of Dark Chaos, Black Chaos, and then it's on your field, and you would like to have the Blackluster Soldier, Soldier of Light and Darkness in your hand, typically because this one, upon summon, lets you banish a card on the field that the opponent controls. So essentially, you're trying to get to this setup on turn 1. When they activate something and you want to bounce out, you basically just return your Magician of Black Chaos to the hand and summon out the Blackluster Soldier, you get your banish, and then when they try to deal with your Blackluster Soldier, you return that one, summon back out the Magician of Dark Chaos, Black Chaos, and then add a spell back for follow-up. So basically the idea of this deck is you're just trying to present very, very annoying cards to your opponent, and you have a phenomenal grind game with this deck. Another thing to keep in mind is that Mind Shuffle, first of all, does not have to return the ritual monsters to your hand. It has great synergy with any good level 7 or higher monster that you can return to your hand, an example being Fedralis Harmonia, because this deck does not really use the extra deck much. So you're going to be able to return something like Fedralis Harmonia to your hand to summon out your ritual monsters and then reuse the Fedralis on future turns. So that is just how the deck basically picks, and there's a couple of awesome cards in the set to make it all work. You've got your two best starters, quote unquote, which is Black Chaos and Grifo. Both of these work in a very similar fashion. Grifo you can discard to the graveyard to set a quick play spell or a trap that mentions the Light and Darkness ritual, and you can activate it immediately on that turn. So basically it just gets you to Mind Shuffle and then you can immediately activate it. The interesting part about Grifo is that Grifo is a quick effect, so you can use it on your opponent's turn, even on turn 0. So there are some hands where you can legitimately, let's say you open Grifo and Fedralis Harmonia, you can use Grifo on turn 0, set Mind Shuffle, summon out Fedralis Harmonia on your opponent's turn as a disruption. Then you can get one of the rituals to your hand with the search effect of Mind Shuffle, and then once your opponent activates something, you just return your Fedralis Harmonia for later use and bring out one of your rituals. It's really, really good that way. And then Black Chaos is basically the same, because you can just send it from your hand to the graveyard to place a continuous trap that mentions the ritual Light and Darkness from your deck. So it does a kind of similar thing as the Grifo in that sense. This one is not a quick effect, however, it does have another effect as well, because you can summon it from your hand by shuffling a spellcaster or warrior ritual monster from hand or grave into the deck. So it's a relatively easy to summon 3000 attack beatstick, and it also can, once per turn during the main phase, banish 2 cards the opponent controls, which is non-targeting. So great form of removal. Banishing in general is obviously a great form of removal, and it's also unaffected while you have a ritual spell in the grave. So essentially, not only these two guys are really hard to remove, but also Black Chaos is really hard to remove. And basically, this is either a starter, or if you already have access to your trap, then you can just summon it. So really, really good. A really important card to the deck that makes it all tick is Skull Archfiend of Chaos. This card does 2 really important things for this deck. The more important part is that it says, if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can send a ritual spell from your hand or deck to the grave and then add a ritual monster whose name is listed on that card from your deck to your hand. So essentially, as soon as this hits the graveyard, you send Light and Darkness ritual from your deck to the grave, and then you can add a ritual monster, any of these 2, from your deck to your hand. The reason why this is so good is because it's a graveyard effect. So this is the one that you're going to usually discard for your Mind Shuffle. And if you already have it in hand while you have Mind Shuffle on the field, you can search whatever you want and then discard it. But even if you don't have it in your hand yet, usually what you're going to do is Mind Shuffle, add Skull Archfiend of Chaos, and then immediately discard it and then get its effect. So an example first turn, if you open Grifo for this deck, could look as the following, and it's really not that complicated. The deck is relatively straightforward. You could discard Grifo to get your Mind Shuffle. You can activate it immediately because Grifo says so. You can use the Mind Shuffle to add Skull Archfiend, immediately discard Skull Archfiend, then use its effect, send the ritual spell, and then add your Magician of Dark Chaos to your hand. Here's where the graveyard effect of the Light and Darkness ritual comes in. I guess we haven't talked about the ritual spell yet, but once per turn, if it's in the grave, you can add itself and any card that mentions Light and Darkness ritual from your grave back to your hand. So just free card advantage here, adding both of these cards back to your hand. And also, the material for this card's ritual summon can be from your hand or field, or you can also banish it from your graveyard. And Grifo has the additional line of text that it can be treated as the entire tribute for a ritual summon that requires tributes. So you can then activate Light and Darkness Ritual, banish Grifo, and then summon your Magician of Dark Chaos, Black Chaos. Upon summon, it's going to add back your Light and Darkness Ritual from the graveyard. And you basically have your full setup here from this engine, because once it rolls around to your opponent's turn, you can use Mind Shuffle, add another card related to the archetype to your hand from your deck, and then you can discard the Skull Archfiend again, send another copy of the ritual spell, get your Blackluster Soldier that way, and now you have the little loop established, right? Just from one Grifo. And Black Chaos is the same thing in this instance because it's a level 8 monster in your graveyard that you can just banish for the full cost of the ritual spell because both of your rituals are level 8. So yeah. We have the Celtic Mystic as well. It sounds absurd, but it is really that good. It's just a draw 3, discard 2 upon summon. All you have to do is reveal your hand and reveal that you have any card in your hand that mentions the Light and Darkness ritual, so it doesn't work on its own as a generic card. Also, it locks you into just one summon from the extra deck for the rest of the turn, but that's really, really good. And then you also have the Chaos Magical Hats, which is a card that some people play in this deck, some people don't. It's an interruption. It's basically an Omni-Negate because it lets you change an opponent's card effect into something else. And that is really strong. At the same time, it's basically an engine requirement. And a lot of people have been choosing to run, instead of running Mind Shuffle and Chaos Magical Hats, they run a second copy of Mind Shuffle. Because most of the time, when you have the opportunity to get the Chaos Magical Hats, that would also mean you could just get to a second copy of Mind Shuffle. And here's the thing, because for this deck, it is so hard to get rid of their monsters because they're unaffected and they can bounce in and out so easily. Usually what people are going to try and do is they want to out the Mind Shuffle first. You know, this is going to be like a Ghost Ogre is a very good card against this deck to get rid of Mind Shuffle. Fallen at the Virtuous is the prime target for it is Mind Shuffle in this matchup. So in a lot of cases, it's probably better to just get a second copy of Mind Shuffle onto the field instead of going for Chaos Magical Hats. So a lot of the versions have been using 2 copies of it, especially because it makes drawing the 1 copy less bad, because the Grifo can only set it from the deck. You cannot set it from your hand with Grifo. So if you happen to draw the 1 copy of Mind Shuffle together with Grifo, that would be pretty bad. So there's just a lot of reasons why I think a second copy of Mind Shuffle makes more sense than the Chaos Magical Hats. And I don't know if people want to play all 3 of them. Technically not part of this archetype, but also really, really good here is Ragged Records of Rites. This is a card that just says reveal a ritual spell from hand or deck, and then add a monster from your deck to your hand that mentioned that spell's name, which is really good. So basically just adding any monster, so in this deck you have like the 9 1-card starters right off the bat. There's more ways to pair with these cards, and in general, this is a deck that, because it has very little reliance on any sort of important resource, like you're not really, you're locked into, if you use the Celtic Mystic, you're locked into 1 summon from the extra deck, but in general there's no really like retroactive locking or anything like that. It's a very compatible deck with other strategies. I've seen people use it a lot with the Fallen of the White Dragon as a little package, because there are several ways how you can bridge into this engine from the Fallen of the White Dragon, because realistically this deck on its own is kind of limited to these 9 starters here if you play 3 of each of these, and that is just not quite consistent enough. So a lot of people have chosen to run the Fallen of the White Dragon, and the way the Fallen of the White Dragon can bridge into this is because Grifo is a fiend. So what you can do is, because of course the Fallen of the White Dragon is a 1-card level 8 synchro, you can make the Crimson King from the previous core set, and that can search a card that mentions Red Dragon Archfiend, and that can be your Soul Resonator, which can search Grifo. And there's also a spell from the previous set that is called Crimson Call that can add a level 4 or lower fiend monster from grave to hand, or if you control the Crimson King, you can add it from the deck instead. So essentially, multiple ways to search Grifo via that level 8 synchro, which is why a lot of people are choosing to pair those decks together. They pair very well, also for the reason of another card that is in this set that I'm going to show and talk about later. But yeah, I mean, in general, the deck is not very normal summon reliant. The only normal summon in here is the Celtic Mystic, and it's not a mandatory inclusion. So you can pair it with other decks that need the normal summon. And just in general, it's just a very efficient, very grindy engine for its standard. Like, it's got answers to basically everything. You've got banishes, you've got non-target banishes, you've got recycling, you've got a great grind game. And it's just an awesome engine. And it is one of the decks that I have my eyes on for the European Championship. I really hope it's something that in testing I'm going to end up liking enough to bring. Because, like, you know me, I like these kind of like grindy decks that don't really shine in terms of like, oh, they make a crazy turn 1 board, but they kind of like have a nice grind game and are flexible. So I really like it for that. And then we have the new chess archetype, the new TCG exclusive archetype that is supposed to resemble a game of chess. And I think it does so in a very, very interesting fashion. Essentially, the way this deck works is it has no main deck monsters. It is all synchros at the moment in the extra deck. And these are, of course, meant to represent the white chess pieces. And so far, we only have 4. We are missing the bishop and the queen. At the moment, we have the king, the knight, the rook, and the pawn. And of course, as in true chess fashion, they don't all go into the monster zone. The big ones usually go into your spell trap zone like they would in a game of chess. And the pawn is the one that you usually summon up here. If you summon it with the trap, it would go into the extra monster zone. But yeah. The way this deck works is essentially these cards have effects when they're on the field, but they also have effects, except for the pawn, because it's not supposed to go into the back row. Basically, these 3 in the back row have the following effect. The rook, if you place it into the spell trap zone, you will be able to place the king as well. And then it offers protection to the other cards in your spell trap zone, or other angelic key cards on the field in general cannot be destroyed by opponent's card effects. It places your king and it gets you protection. The king, when it's placed into the spell trap zone, you can add an angelic key trap card from deck or grave to your hand. And then it says, while it's a continuous spell, your opponent can only attempt to activate 5 monster effects per turn, not more than that. And there are ways in this deck that I'm going to show you in a second to set this up on turn 0. So this is something that you potentially have to play against, no matter whether you're going first or second against angelic key. And then the horse has the effect when it's placed in the spell trap zone, you can add an angelic key spell from deck to hand, which at the moment they only have the field spell. While this is in the spell trap zone, every time they activate a card or effect, they take 500 damage. And this stacks with multiple horses. So essentially, the way I've seen people approach this deck is they're either trying to set up the king to limit the opponent in terms of how much they can do in a turn, or you try to place multiple of the knight to essentially do the same thing, limit your opponent to only a certain number of actions before they literally die. So like, it's a masquerade that I find somewhat problematic in some ways, because it's a masquerade that's in the spell trap zone, which does make it harder to deal with, especially if it's protected by the rook, or it's protected by you can only activate 5 times anyways. Like, a masquerade is something you can at least attack over, but if this deck manages to place multiple of the horse in the spell trap zone, that is really hard to out for some decks, especially with the rook protection, to where you can't just fall into virtuous it or something like that. So yeah. The way this deck works, because it doesn't have any main deck monsters, is just it has a couple of spell traps, and these 2 cards essentially do the same thing, but this one does it going first and this one does it going second. So the field spell says this card is spell trap, special a level 2 angelic key monster from the extra deck, which is going to be your pawn, and then you get to place one other one from your extra deck into the spell trap zone. So usually what you're going to do is activate angelic key problem, which is meant to represent your chessboard, summon a pawn in the front row, bring out the rook, bring out the king, and then search a trap, or just bring out the horse and search a spell. But usually, since that's the only spell that the deck has, I think it doesn't really make that much sense to place the horse. So you get to this position, basically, where here you have the rook protecting the king limiting your opponent to only 5 activations, and you have a free pawn on the board, which is, at the end of the day, a level 2 tuner that you can do anything with, because the deck doesn't have any locks attached to it. We do have another way to get going, which is actually kind of absurd, which is angelic key opening to e4. What this card says is if it's your opponent's first turn, you can also activate this card from the hand during the standby phase. And it essentially does exactly this. You place an angelic key field spell from hand, deck, or grave. Then you summon a level 2 or 7 Angelic monster from your extra deck to the extra monster zone this time around. And then you get to place one from the extra deck. So essentially you can do this exact same thing, but going second immediately from just one hand trap, quote unquote. And you don't even lose a card in your hand because you can use the king immediately to search for another trap card. So you're not even losing any card advantage. This is essentially free. This card locks you into synchros until the end of the next turn, but still. And this is already kind of like the reason why this deck is being looked at the moment. Not as its own deck, because obviously you're not going to really build a deck around just 3 cards. Disturbance is fine. It's a good Foolish Burial Goods target. You can banish from the grave to add an Angelic spell trap, so you can have more starters via Foolish Burial Goods. People are playing it as a very synchro combo-oriented deck because you could potentially bridge into this with other strategies because these, at the end of the day, are generic synchros. But more importantly, I've seen people use it as like just a sub-engine that just provides like one starter and one hand trap to your deck. And that's just been fine. Because this is also a trap card, it does make Dominus cards a lot better because you start your turn off with a trap card in the graveyard when you're going second sometimes. And just in general, I've seen some pretty crazy ideas about like using this with like a lot of other Dominus cards and just an insane amount of hand traps in general, and then just walking away with the Angelic cards for the win. Also, these are all synchros, so you can easily play Fedralis Harmonia as well. So a lot of exclusively hand traps that are exclusively playable for this deck, basically. So we'll see where it goes. I'm not quite sure whether I like it or not. I've seen people already post some very gimmicky like FTKs for it online. I personally don't believe in those. I don't think that's going to be the way that this deck ends up being used. But I do think they have a lot of potential, especially because of how good this card in particular is. So yeah, keep an eye out for Angelic. I think it could end up surprising us and being very, very strong. And then we have Invoked. Invoked gets some very, very crazy tools. There's 2 parts to the new Invoked support. You have some new main deck cards, and you have some new extra deck cards. If you want to see my first reaction to these cards, or any of these cards, my first reaction was on my Plus channel whenever they were announced. For these, essentially, what I would break these down is, first let's talk about the new extra deck tools they got, which most importantly, I think Oceanus and Aeon are the 2 big deals here. So Hyper Invoked Aeon is a crazy card for Invoked because it essentially, it says it does require 2 or more fusion monsters with different attributes. And it says if it's fusion summoned, you can banish cards from field and grave up to the number of materials used, non-target, which is really good. But most importantly, if you used 3 or more materials, you can look at your opponent's extra deck and banish up to 3 cards from it. This is very, very good. And I want to say really quick that this is not even exclusive to Invoked. This just needs 2+ fusion monsters with different attributes. This is something that other decks could do too, if they just spam a couple of fusion monsters and have a good way to fuse into this. And ripping 3 out of the extra deck is insane in my opinion, because 3 is the exact number of a playset. Like there's no way to hide from this. Like remember when people played like a second copy of their most important card in the extra deck to play around Kashtira Unicorn? It's not possible with Hyper Invoked Aeon. There's no way to hide from this effect. You will always lose your most important card to it. As a result, people are probably not going to play multiples of the cards, and then you just lose 3 different cards from the extra deck, which depending on the matchup is insane. I think the only thing that is holding this card back a little bit is that it's releasing in a format where there's a couple of other decks in the format that don't rely on the extra deck that much, like the Ritual of Light and Darkness we looked at earlier, like Blitzkrieg, which we're going to look at in a second. But in general, I think this card is insane, and I think it's only a matter of time until this card finds a way into the metagame. Whether it's with the Invoked cards or whether it's just as a generic fusion to be made in other decks, I think this card is crazy. And then we have Oceanus, which honestly isn't much less crazy, even though it's just a common. But this card simply says, while this card's in the extra monster zone, any monster sent to your opponent's graveyard is banished instead. It has other text on it, but it's essentially a dimensional fissure for the opponent. It's crazy. So both of these cards, very, very strong. Also kind of toxic, to be honest with you. The other 2 are more like engine. Like this one adds a card on from your deck to your hand upon summon, which we're going to talk about in a second. This one's pretty cool, actually, the Sorath. It's a quick effect during the main phase to target a level 6 or lower monster in either graveyard, and then special summon it to your field, but negate it. And if it's in the grave, you can fusion summon an invoked fusion monster from your extra deck by banishing it from the grave and monsters from your field or graveyard. So this is an easy way to summon the Aeon, but in general, it's a pretty cool card. So yeah, we got 4 more invoked fusion monsters. Also, most importantly, these cards now need an Alistair monster. These three. They no longer need Alistair the Invoker. They need an Alistair monster plus 2 different attributes. This one's Lighter Earth. This one is Fire or Wind. This one is Dark and Water. So, and this is important because there's a new Alistair on the block. Alistair the Reminiscent is a new spellcaster that says if this card's in your hand, target a spellcaster monster or a fusion monster on the field, special summon this card. If you do, the targeted monster gains 1000. This card's normal or special summoned or flip face up. You can banish an invoke monster from your extra deck and then add an invocation or a spell that mentions it from your deck to your hand. This is essentially an upgraded version of Alistair because it works on normal and special summon. It's an extender. That's very important because the deck still works with the OG Alistair. The OG Alistair is technically still a good card in this deck, but this one is just a bonus because it can also be an extender. And banishing one from your extra deck can actually be beneficial because the deck has ways to fuse from banish now. So pretty good card, honestly. And then we have Iwas and Virokam, 2 support cards that are honestly fine. This card is essentially a searcher for Alistair the Reminiscent, which there's also an emergency teleport for, basically, Sacred Spirit Sword Iwas, so you can play up to 9 copies of this card, which is pretty neat. And then you have Virokam, the Divine Spirit of Artifice, which is an extender that also sets invocation or a spell that mentions it from your deck. And when your opponent activates a card or effect in response to your fusion monster's effect, you can banish this card you control and then negate that effect. So essentially, if you're playing a pure invoke deck, this could be a very strong extender slash way to play through hand traps and make sure that your super important cards like Hyper Invoked Aeon resolve. And keep in mind that like Invoked already has, even besides these new fusion monsters, Invoked already has some really, really powerful fusion monsters. I mean, we're talking Invoked Mechaba, which is an Omni Negate. We're talking Invoked Kaliga, which is a crazy floodgate. But also just random stuff like Invoked Ragin, which is a quick effect Book of Moon. Like there's some really high quality fusions in Invoked already. So adding just more to the mix, I think, like there's real potential with these cards, whether as its own deck or whether they are a splash in other fusion-based strategies. I think there's a lot of potential with these. Because there's just no way that a Macrocosmos on legs and an extra deck rip is not viable somehow. The main deck engine cards are also pretty decent quality-wise. We also have a new invocation spell, Invocation Sword, which this is a card that says you fusion summon using monsters you control, and if you're summoning an invoked monster, you can also return monsters from any banishment to the graveyard as material. During your main phase, if this card's in the grave, target Alistair or invocation in your grave, shuffle this card into the deck, and then add that target to the hand. So we have a quick play fusion spell for Invoked now that also has a graveyard recursion effect and can use monsters from the banished pile that we have previously put there with Alistair the Reminiscent, or we've put them there by just fusing with the regular invocation. So really, really good. And they have a trap called Gamma Summon, which banishes an Alistair or a fusion from your grave to special and invoke monster from the extra deck, ignoring its summoning conditions, but banish it during the end phase. Very easy way to summon like a Kaliga on your opponent's turn. Not sure if this card is going to end up seeing play, because I'm going to be honest with you, a quick play fusion spell is probably already good enough, but in a pure invoke deck, maybe you want this card as well. But yeah, just in general, there's a very, very strong mix of cards here. We've got crazy new extra deck tools paired with some crazy main deck tools. So I think there's a lot of potential with the new Invoked, but I'm a little scared of it because it does have some pretty crazy effects that I'm not sure I'm a big fan of, but yeah. And then we've got Blitzclick. Now, Blitzclick is probably next to the Chaos deck, my favorite archetype in this new set. Blitzclick is a deck with very healthy restrictions, a very straightforward game plan, but a pretty cool execution. So this deck is all about destruction, and it's all thunder monsters that summon themselves from the hand. They have a lot of really, really strong effects. However, they come with the drawback that you cannot special summon effect monsters except from the hand. So a very strict lock, essentially locking you completely out of the extra deck and graveyard, but they got some pretty good effects to boot. So essentially all of these have something to do with destruction. The easiest one to take a look at are probably just your basic ones like Grain and Surge. So both of these are relatively simple. Surge Blitzclick says you can reveal this card in your hand, target a monster on the field, destroy it, and if you do, special a thunder from your hand. This is something that they all have in common. They can special summon themselves from the hand, but they can also special summon other thunder monsters from your hand, which also has like synergies with some other thunder decks or cards from the past, like Thunder King Ryo is unfortunately really good in this deck sometimes. Like not everyone plays it in the OCG, but you can, because all of these can summon it, sometimes even on turn 0. But yeah, and then you have Grain Blitzclick, which does the same thing, but for a spell trap. So both of these just free summons from the hand and destroying a card on the field, which makes them significantly better going second than going first, because when you're going second, you can just pop your opponent's cards with these. So this deck is naturally pretty strong going second. All of the blitz clicks, actually, all of the small blitz clicks have effects on the field when they see another card get destroyed to create further card advantage. So for Surge, if it's on the field and then another card is destroyed by a blitz click, you can add a blitz click monster from your deck to your hand. For Grain, you add a blitz click spell or their field spell from deck to hand. So pretty simple. This one pops monsters and searches monsters. This one pops spell traps and searches spells. So Grain and Surge. Then we've got Emmy, which is the poplar of the deck. If it's added except by drawing, you can special summon it and destroy a card on the field. You have to destroy a card on the field. And then special a Thunder from hand. And then if this card sees a card being destroyed by another card effect while it's on the field, this one adds a blitz click trap from your deck to your hand. So you've got your monster search, spell search, trap search, if something on the field is destroyed while they are there. A little bit of a special one is Crackle Blitz Click, because this is a hand trap. During your opponent's turn, when your opponent activates a monster effect on the field, quick effect, reveal this card, destroy that monster, and then you can special a Thunder from your hand, which basically makes it a Ghost Ogre that also summons a monster from your hand for just monsters. You know, Ghost Ogre can be used on spell traps, of course. But that's pretty good. It's a turn 0 play for this deck, popping a monster, summoning one from hand. Pretty strong. Got some 2-card combinations available as well. If Crackle Blitzclick sees another card being destroyed by card effect, you can send a Blitzclick spell trap from your deck to the grave, which can get you some advantage as well. The only one that works differently in the bunch here that isn't like, oh, destroy something, special summon, is Whisker Blitzclick, which says, during a turn, a card was destroyed by a Blitzclick effect. Quick effect, reveal this card in your hand, special up to 3 Thunders from your hand, then you can destroy up to that many cards on the field. Also for the rest of the turn, can special summon, except from the hand, and when a monster effect is activated except in the hand, return one other Thunder you control to the hand, negate the activation. If this deck ever draws Crackle plus Whisker, it's genuinely insane, because Crackle fulfills the requirement for Whisker on turn 0, and then you can Whisker, summon all of your blitz clicks from the hand, pop that many cards, and then also, because the way this card is worded is it summons the guys first and then pops the cards after, you can trigger all of their effects because they will see the cards being destroyed, and then once it's on the field, it returns cards to your hand for follow-up to get a negation. So Whisker plus Crackle is like your dream combo when you're going second. It's like your Holly Sue plus Fire Dark, basically. It's really, really good. So yeah, that's basically the idea. You just try to summon these main deck guys, pop other stuff on the field, and then you get a lot of card advantage. And also just have a naturally strong deck going second because you've got a turn 0 hand trap, and these guys can all pop stuff on the field while playing into the board. So it's really, really good at that. They have a field spell, which is worth mentioning. They got a lot of spell traps that have like small bonuses and all at themselves. The spells all at themselves back from the graveyard if a card is being destroyed by a blitz click, which basically gives this deck a lot of grind game because you try to put these cards in the grave and then they get all added back to your hand over and over and over again. But the field spell is worth mentioning because first of all, it is a searcher, but it also gives your opponent a token, which is very important because that's something that you can destroy on your first turn with your Surge, for example. Because usually, like, even though this deck likes cards being destroyed, you don't always want to destroy your own cards, especially the monsters, because you kind of want to keep those around. So giving your opponent a token on the first turn is how you can get going on the first turn with that. And then they also have 2 trap cards, one of which is basically ideal to be destroyed because it has a great graveyard effect, which is the Alternator, which does say you can banish it from the graveyard and then add a Blitzclick spell or your field spell, because it's not called Blitzclick, from your deck to your hand. A lot of the times you're going to send this to the graveyard with the Crackle to then banish it and search for your field spell. So that's Blitzclick. I think this deck is awesome. I think the lock on it is pretty healthy. I genuinely think that it has potential. It's been doing okay in the OCG. The lock on it is rather harsh, so you can't really branch it into other decks. I mean, some people have played it with other decks, but generally I think pure Blitzclick is where it's at, and I do think it's a pretty cool and overall honestly pretty healthy deck, with the only exception that it sometimes summons stuff like Thunder King Ryo. But I honestly don't even know if that's the ideal way to play the deck. I hope it ends up not being the best way to play it. I hope it's just this really removal focused strategy that has a great grind game, which is what I'm hoping for it to do. But yeah, pretty awesome deck in my opinion. Then we've got some honorable mentions. The video is already relatively long, so I'm just going to go quickly over these. We've got new Melfi support in this set, which is all low rarity, making this probably a very interesting budget alternative for players. And I genuinely, if we're ignoring just competitive viability completely, these are my favorite cards in this set. Let me just give you a quick rundown. So Melfis are all cards where the majority of the Melfis have an effect to summon themselves from the hand during the end phase. It's meant to have the main deck monsters on the field, and then they all do little annoying things on the opponent's turn when the opponent summons or targets them for an attack. And so now Melfi's used to just be like an engine that sometimes people played like 2 of them in sprites, but now they can be their own deck because Melfi Footsteps reads like a completely insane card, but it makes sense for Melfis. This card adds 4 Melfis with different names from your deck to your hand. That's it. But it does become the end phase of your turn. So basically, the idea is this card fully sets you up for your Melfis. You just add 4 and summon them all from your hand in the end phase. And then you have a lot of new tools. A Melfi God Mommy is a way to rank up with Melfi Mommy now, because Melfi Mommy is pretty mediocre, but now it becomes a good card. They have a new fusion monster, which they can fuse into with Melfi Rabbies. Melfi Rabbies is a new tool for the deck. This is a turn 0 play, because if the opponent normals or special summons, you can special it from the hand, then you can fusion summon. Also, if it's normal or special, you can add a Melfi monster from deck to your hand, so it's pretty good. In general, this deck, to me, just feels like a really, really grindy deck full of small interactions that I think is awesome. So I don't think it's the most competitively viable because the way it plays, I don't even think it's necessarily bad. It's just slow. And so I think even if it ends up being solid, it ends up having really, really long and grindy games basically every time. I'm not sure if it's strong enough going second, but even if it is, it's just going to be like very prone to double losses, I think. But this is a deck that you can be 100% sure as soon as the European Championship is over, I'm going to take this deck to locals and I'm going to have a great time with it. I think these cards are awesome. Also, honorable mention, new Phantom Knight support. And also, there's a new TCG exclusive for Phantom Knights. These cards are pretty high quality. I haven't really looked into the deck itself yet, but they get a new rank up magic, which is always bad news. They get 2 really strong new main deck monsters. They get a really good new rank 3 and a new trap card as well, which is activatable the turn it was set. So also really strong, like sometimes going second because it's not a dead card at least. My first impression of these new cards is that they are pretty good for the deck, but they do a really good job at nailing the Phantom Knight's identity. Like the deck still feels like Phantom Knights, but just with a new updated version. So I'm a fan of the deck itself. I'm just a little worried about what exactly they can do with the new rank up card. Rank up cards usually have some pretty toxic potential. At the same time, that probably makes this deck better if there's something toxic you can do with the rank up card. However, this is a very classic case of, I think this deck is now at the point where basically a lot of modern combo decks are, where with the new support, it is high quality enough to play through a lot of low impact hand traps. But if you're hit with something like a Mulcharmy, you're going to be in a very tough spot, which is your classic tier 2 combo deck basically. So I personally don't think it's going to be any higher than that. But I did want to mention that they got support, and if you're a fan of the Phantom Knight deck and playstyle, I think it's worth looking into. I don't think the cards are bad. I think they're definitely good enough for like a regional top 8 or something like that. Maybe even a YCS top if someone gets a good day and really masters the deck. I'm not quite sure if it's good enough for that, but these cards are pretty solid. And then we've got 2 new Clown Crews, which I just wanted to mention because Clown Crew is one of my favorite decks that released this year. I haven't really managed to bring it to any big tournaments yet, but I think I will in the upcoming season. I'll definitely bring Clown Crew to at least 1 regional and try my best and see what I can do. They get a Link monster, so now they have removal for Links, which is really good. Unfortunately, the other graveyard effect is not that great. It lets each player shuffle their hand into the deck and draw a new hand, which is not that great. But removal for Links is good. And the new trap is good. Unfortunately, these 2 cards were released in the OCG basically at the same time as a 3rd Clown Crew support card. But that was a like V-Jump promo or something like that, which is always really hard to predict when we are going to get those in the TCG. And unfortunately, I think it's a Pendulum monster for Clown Crew. I'm going to put an image here. That really makes the deck tick more. Like that, basically the deck needs more consistency, and that Pendulum monster was going to give it that consistency. And without it, I think these 2 cards just don't really hit the same. But I did want to mention it because it is one of my favorite decks this year, and I'm going to try it at some point with the new cards. I really wish they gave them the 3rd card as well. All right, and this honestly, now we're getting into, well, maybe even besides the new archetypes, one of the most important aspects of this new set. It has a lot of really good generic cards. I think that's where this pack really shines, is the generic section. We're starting things off with Pot of Sloth, which is my favorite card in this set. And in general, one of my favorite like side deck staples that they've made. So this card says draw cards equal to the number of cards your opponent controls, and if you drew 2 or more cards, you place cards from your hand to the bottom of the deck in any order equal to the number you drew -1. So basically, if they control 3 cards, you draw 3 cards, put back 2. So it's a free mulligan, basically. And I mean, here's the thing. A lot of decks these days going first will put up like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 cards onto the field. You get to pick your hand, essentially, when you're going second with Pot of Sloth. So in board breaker decks, this card goes incredibly hard, and I'm a big fan of it. I think it's awesome. It's only a side deck card, naturally, because going first it's completely dead. But I think this card is great. This card has 2 downsides. Essentially, number 1, if your opponent gets to negate it, you don't get all the benefits, which is the thing with a lot of board breakers. But like, I mean, like let's say your opponent goes first, makes a board and has Ash Blossom. This card not being a board breaker directly is not going to help you. And the second problem is when you get rolled after you use it. However, I will say when you resolve a big Pot of Sloth and you draw a bunch of cards, you can technically pick your hand to a point where maybe roll doesn't hurt you that much, depending on what you're playing, right? Maybe you just put back a couple of your searchers, or you try to find something like Cult by the Grave because you're drawing like a bunch of cards, and it can be fine. This card is amazing. Any board breaker deck, I think, should play 3 Pot of Sloth. Like your branded Draco Tails, your Sky Strikers, your Doomsies or whatever, like all of those decks, I'm gonna put Pot of Sloth in immediately, and I'm really looking forward to playing with this card. I think it's gonna offer a whole new dimension at going second into combo boards, as long as they don't have a bunch of Omni Negates for it. But yeah, I think it's a great card. Mixuzia the Confounder is a very interesting TCG exclusive card that is a spellcaster monster and a non-spellcaster monster. It has multiple effects, but the most important part is during your opponent's main phase, quick effect, fusion summon a fusion monster from your extra deck by banishing this card and monsters from your field or graveyard. This lets you cheat a lot of fusion requirements depending on where you're at. Just an example, I think this card is meant to be Alistair/invoked support, and it does that relatively well, but also is really good in Branded, because Branded has a lot of spellcasters and non-spellcasters. This gives you a way to really easily make Mirror Jade out of all kinds of different things, like a Cartesia plus any non-spellcaster. If you have an Albaz in the graveyard, you can make Mixuzia, and then Mixuzia is your extra deck monster, and Albaz is your Albaz, and that makes Mirror Jade, right? Which previously, you would have had to go Cartesia plus specifically Albaz into Albion to make a Mirror Jade. Now, even if your Albaz is somewhere in the graveyard, you can still make a Mirror Jade with this. Branded obviously struggles with extra deck space already, but this card in general is really good, because it's just 2 materials. It just happens that a lot of spellcaster decks have fusions, you know, like the invoked cards like Draco Tails have spellcasters. The Albaz lore has a lot of spellcasters that fusion summon, so there's a lot of potential for this card. And then the 3 Champions of Sword Soul. This is a very, very good card. It's a level 8 synchro that is generic. It does need a level 4 tuner, so it's not completely generic, but if this card is synchro summoned, add a level 4 or 8 spellcaster whose attack equals its own defense from your deck or grave to your hand, and you can target a face-up card on the field to negate it, and if you have Ecclesia or Albaz in the grave, you can even destroy it. This is obviously a card that sees play in some Branded variations, because it makes for some stronger synchro lines, like you just make it with Albaz plus Ecclesia, and then you search your Cartesia or Quem or whatever, really good, but also has a great synergy with another card that we're going to talk about next. But just for this card, it's going to be very, very, very good in synchro Branded variations, which I think get a significant boost with this set. The card I was referring to is Farah the Primordial Goddess, which is also an overframe in this set and looks great as an overframe card. Actually, I think this card is relatively underrated right now. It sees some play in the OCG, but I think this card is phenomenal. This card says you can reveal this card and any spell trap in your hand, and until the end of the next turn, neither player can activate cards or effects in response to that card. So basically, it turns everything into Super Poly. Any spell trap that you really care about resolving, you could turn it into Super Poly. But even better than that, if this card is sent from the field or hand to the graveyard by a spell trap effect, you can special summon it. And if this card is special summoned from the graveyard, you can just take control of your opponent's biggest monster. The idea here is that this is supposed to be fusion and ritual support, because you just reveal it next to your fusion spell, and then you activate your fusion spell or ritual spell, use it as a tribute, and then it comes back from the grave and steals your opponent's stuff. So it's a great board breaker in that sense, because you can just reveal your cards, make them unrespondable when you're playing into a board, and then use it as fusion material, use it as ritual fodder, comes back from the grave, gives you a beat stick, and steals one of their monsters. Has great synergies with the Ritual of Light and Darkness, because this also triggers when you discard it for the Mind Shuffle, for example, but can also be played in Branded decks or whatever to just fuse with it, or Draco Tail. I mean, in Draco Tail, you would often be fusing with a monster effect, so I guess it doesn't work because it has to be sent by a spell trap effect. But if you fuse this away with a Ketu, like going second and revealing Farah plus Ketu is crazy, I guess, but Ketu is limited. But yeah, the reason I'm mentioning these two together is because the 3 champions of Sword Soul can search this because it is a spellcaster with equal attack and defense. So the fact that like it's now a searchable card and potentially a one-of in decks that can make level 8 synchros, I think matters a lot. So that the fact that these two released together, I think is very, very relevant. Elf Notes and Power Patrons get new support as well. Elf Note June Pride is a phenomenal card for the Elf Note deck. It makes Regina a crazy turn 0 play now because this is a level 10 synchro, which finally gives you something good to go into with the effect of the Power Patron on the opponent's turn. This card says, during the main phase, if this card's in the center main monster zone, quick effect, return this card to the extra deck. If you do, special summon up to 1 Elf Note monster from hand, deck, and grave. You can only use each effect once per turn. So what you're going to do with this is, you're going to use, let's say going second with Regina, right? Regina discards an Elf Note to summon herself to the center main monster zone, summons the Power Patron. Use the Power Patron to level manipulate. You get a level 10 synchro in the center. Return it to the extra deck. Regina returns to your hand because you used it as synchro material, and the Elf Note Power Patron searches you another Elf Note that you want to summon. Then you're going to return the Elf Note June Pride to your extra deck. You're going to summon, let's say you search for a Tinia with the Power Patron. You can special Tinia from your hand, you can special Lucina from your deck, and you can special whatever you sent for Regina or the Power Patron from the graveyard. And then you basically have full setup on turn 0, 3 monsters on the board, 1 in hand, and you can do the thing where they switch places because you have multiple monsters on the board now and get all of their disruptions. So this card now makes Regina a real turn 0 threat, pretty much on par with something like Holly Sue because it fully sets you up and gives you a hand rip from Tinia and a bounce from Lucina, so really strong. And then you also have a new relatively generic Link monster. It's Purification Power Patron. If this card's Link Summon and you have a Power Patron in your grave, you can add a Theorealized card from your deck to your hand, so that's really good. Sometimes now people finally have a reason to play Theorealized cards sometimes. If you control another Dark Fairy, you can quick effect immediately Link Summon a Link monster using materials you control, so it's kind of like an IP Masquerena that also searches the Theorealized card. Not everyone's been using it in Power Patron, and you guys know I'm not the biggest fan of the Power Patron combo decks, but it is a card that's worth mentioning. All right, for all the trap enjoyers, I have Annihilate Retroglyte. This card says when your opponent activates a monster effect on the field, except monsters that were summoned this turn, negate that activation, then banish face down all monsters that were not summoned this turn. And if this card is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can set any trap from the deck. So the way this card is supposed to work is it's supposed to be used as a board breaker going second, because of course going first, this card is essentially completely useless because nothing is going to be summoned not this turn for the opponent. But when your opponent makes a board already, you're supposed to set it, and then when they do something with their board, you're supposed to activate it and banish all the stuff that they summoned on the previous turn, which is a very interesting tool for going second with trap decks. I will say I'm very happy about this. It's a little weird because going first, it's so bad that I don't know if it's going to make a meaningful impact because you wouldn't really be able to main deck it. But I think this is a card to have on your radar in the future. If there's ever a deck that makes a board that's really weak to this card, this could be a very good side deck card, even in like other decks, just for going second, where you just let them cook, let them make their thing, you set it, and then you pass, and then they do something, and you just banish everything. So, interesting card, in my opinion. And as a fan of board breaker traps, you know, I love that one. Last but not least, you know, we've been talking about this set for a whole lot of time now, but here is Zena's Deceiving Doll Maidens. This card's going to get banned in the future. This is a Link 5 that says 2 or more effect monsters, but you can also use a monster from your hand as material. So really easy to summon. And this card is a reimagined version of Curious or Beatrice. This card says, if this card's Link summoned, send a monster from your deck to the grave. That's it. If all the monsters are from your field, and you didn't use one from your hand, basically, you can even send a monster from your extra deck to the graveyard. That's it. During your next standby phase, after this card was sent from the field to the grave, you can add a monster from your graveyard to your hand. That part doesn't matter. Yeah, this part is basically Lavalval Chain, Beatrice, Curious, whatever, all those cards that had to be banned. Again, there are already decks doing FTKs with this card in the OCG, multiple at that. So it's literally only a matter of time until this card is gonna have to be banned. I have no idea why they made this. Another super generic extra deck tool to access any monster from your deck and extra deck as well. Very good card, so I included it, but I genuinely have no idea why they made another one of these. But yeah. Also, I pulled this this amazing card, one of my favorite cards in this set because it looks awesome. The new Sacred Beast. I think the new Sacred Beast cards, because I didn't include them here just for the length of this video, I think they're cool. I don't think they are particularly good in terms of meta viability, but they're all right. They're not bad. But I just love the looks of this overframe that I got. It's awesome. I really love it. Anyways, that's my rundown of Chaos Origins. I hope it wasn't too long. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to leave feedback. Should I keep these shorter in the future? Should I make sure to just include the best of the best? I felt like everything I said today or I talked about today was worth mentioning. So make sure to leave some feedback down below. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you aren't yet. And I'll see you next time, duelists. Bye, everybody. Peace.